caught it. The screen went dark and it just stopped recording. So I should have the first capture. I better have the first capture. And so today's lecture might be in two parts. Okay. Technology. All right, where was I? Oh yeah. So I can pronate my left radial joint. I can wrap it, right? It's still my pinky. This is still my thumb. So ulnar deviation will still be pinky side, and the radial deviation will still be thumb side. So if I have bilateral ulnar deviation, it would actually look something like this. Bilateral radial would look like this. So again, that's why we don't memorize. We don't say, well, if they go the same way, it's different motions. Or what if I pronate one and they're going the same global way, but it's the same motion? Does that make sense? Both of them would go pinky side, both of them would be going thumb side. If I'm an anatomical, they would have to mirror each other. But my left radial joint is not anatomical. So we use these local landmarks to make sure we're seeing what we think we're seeing. Okay? In a different plane, it might look something like this, or bilateral ulnar, bilateral radial, bilateral ulnar, bilateral radial. But I can pronate or internally rotate, and I could go bilateral ulnar would look like this. Bilateral radial would look like this. Deviation to the thumb side. Does that make sense? Could look like this. Bilateral ulnar, pinky side. Bilateral radial, thumb side. Bilateral ulnar, pinky side. Bilateral radial, thumb side. Make sense? These motions really help us in our functional circles of grip. When I say, again, functional circles, it's just how we do things in our bubble. Being able to maintain grip and work on things. Example, all right, let's say Ken was some milk and I wanted to pour him. So there's a hold one hand, Ken. Holding the milk. If I come up, if my wrist didn't ulna deviate, it would have looked something like this. Or a cup of coffee, or that, right? So in other words, in an anatomically neutral wrist, all good. But if I go to flex my elbow and I kept my wrist at neutral, I'd be pouring liquid out the back. Ulnar deviation allows me the function of keeping it level. Does that make sense? So ulnar, radial. You have more movement for ulnar because a lot of motions that require you to lift things typically come by gripping in a semi-prone position. So in other words, these kind of things help much more than these kind of things. So you have much more ulnar deviation for functional tasks like gripping, holding, moving. Like imagine taking a hammer, for instance, and you were trying to hit a nail and you're trying to whip that hammer. So it's like you use your arm, you use your elbow, but the last pop, ulnar deviation, right? Some extra pop on the towel. Ulnar deviation. Okay. Any questions? So elbow, flexion, extension, radial ulnar joint, pronation, supination, wrist, flexion, extension, ulna, and radial deviation. And I tried to explain why we use these terms because right down the road here is freaky ab and abduction stuff. So it'd be like ab, ad, it's just kind of too much. So we just go to the pinky side, to the thumb side. Okay.
So when like if you're tipping back, you go back to radial,
If you move yeah, so if you were here and you want to do this, and you moved your wrist in the wrist from a plane, yes. I wanted to make sure it wasn't if you just drink from your cup, because what if somebody could like pronate or something? So there might be different movement strategies for it. But if you were here and you did this, absolutely, that would be radially engaged. Yeah. All right, let's try to tie all this together, okay? I'm going to give an open-ended question, and I invite you you can do this a couple of ways. One is you can create the bar with your fingers, so like um, you just kind of grab your thumbs. Oh, we're going to do an upright row exercise, because the upright row gives you shoulder, gives you scapula, gives you some illusions with rotation, gives you radiola, gives you wrist, gives you a lot of cool stuff that we can all kind of, that's it, okay? So the question is, you start with the bar, hands are relatively close together. And once we get going, I'll allow you to stand up if you want, I encourage you to stand up, try it out. So you don't have to, but I'm going to walk around with this or two, just in case you want to feel it. So we need to make sure we kind of do some assumptions here. I want you to get the bar all the way up to your chin to emphasize those elbows getting high, okay? All right. So we start here. Now, when you're doing the upright row, just remember, functionally, we need to keep our fingers under that bar. And there may be, I'm giving you hints, there may be motions happening that are trying to take our fingers away from under the bar. So what else can happen while things are moving to make sure that we keep our fingers under the bar? It's big nudge, nudge, hint, hint, okay? So we're going to start here, and we're going to do, this is my max, by the way. Start, finish, and I taught you, hopefully, we've developed enough clues, local landmarks, deviations, and changes that we can figure out what's happening. I want this to be, and I'm not suggesting there is, but is there shoulder stuff happening? If yes, what? Is there elbow stuff happening? If so, what? Is there radioulnar joint stuff happening? If so, what? Is there wrist stuff happening? If so, what? Okay. All right, you guys, feel free to stand up. I'm going to walk around with my Gandalf staff. If anybody wants to use it. Yeah. And that's why I want to encourage you to move. Sometimes it's easier when you do it to feel, oh, okay, I see. So what? Elbow, if so what? Radioulnar, if so what? Wrist, if so what? Analyze things joint by joint. the functional task, the movement pattern, that vertical leap or free throw or upright row, but the parts that make up that functional task are very independent of each joint working on that team. And thus, on our last exam, I'm going to teach you the muscles that influence each joint separately as part of an overall team. We analyze motion joint by joint. Thus, we have to analyze the muscles that influence those joints, joint by joint. Anybody else want to try or use the handles there? All right, I'm going to give everybody a hint. Okay, maybe this confirms what you're thinking. Maybe it doesn't. I'm going to stay well, first of all, what's my radial joint position? Am I wrapped or unwrapped when I start? Wrapped. Cool. Thumb is medial. Superman flies prone. Okay, so I'm pronated, right? If I did the upright row and I stayed prone, I stayed wrapped, look what that would look like. Because after all, this is how Superman flies. No different than if I start off prone and I do this. You see my hands. Now, I know that's not how I was. I got to keep my fingers under the bar. So something has to be going on there to help me maintain that grip, that hold. Guys, just giving you all a heads up, what I might do in the last couple minutes of class is just briefly talk about the knuckles again with the ab and ad, just in case if the first few minutes glitched. I just want to be redundant, make sure we have it on camera. How many of you used your thumb rule as a reference? Like, well, let's see how much movement I have. And that's great reference. Whatever is accurate and works. Absolutely. So the thumb rule is just one tool. So this may not be the only tool, but we always want to cross-reference our tools to make sure it's the right tool. I don't want to put you in a position you can screwdriver, when we need a hand. So that's a good reference. If all right, you guys, do you need more time? It's okay to say yes. Do you need more time? Okay, we'll give you a couple more minutes. What if you're done already with that? I'll add a neck motion for you to analyze. With this. Maybe a TikTok thing. Did I say that word right? Someone's gonna stumble upon this lecture and they're like, he just stands on his cane for like 5 minutes. Like, yes, sponsor my video. Do a lot of cane leaning in this class. All right, you guys, let's do the easy one. What do y'all think the easiest? If you had some metaphorical kinesiology dollars, what would you put your money on as being like, there's no doubt, I know this. You go shoulder? Yeah, I'd go elbow. You can go shoulder. You can go shoulder, Miss Fancy Pants. That's awesome. That's confidence. I'd go elbow, right? Because elbow. No, I'm just messing. So elbow bilateral, both sides, elbow flexion. Cool. Elbow's got more to fetal. Okay. Let's have a new conversation about our wrist. Okay, so we're here. Did my wrist deviate any kind of way? I know I didn't like it. Think of it like this. I always like to use thought examples. I can't really, I'm kind of limited to my flexion and my extension with the bar connecting both sides. Like I can't independently flex because that would literally be like snapping the bar. Does that make sense? I mean, I could, but I only have one, so I'll choose not to. However, my wrist can deviate. So like, you see how if my wrist stayed kind of anatomically neutral and I came up, again, I'd have to snap the bar, like I'd have to bend the bar. So to keep my fingers kind of in the same spot, I'm going to have ulnar deviation. Does that kind of make sense? You see the deviation towards the ulnar side as compared to down here? Here, if I'm down here and I ulnar deviate, I'd have to snap the bar. But that ulnar deviation allows me to bring the bar up and keep my fingers in the same place, right? While other joints are trying to move them. All right. Now let's get to the hard one. Okay. All right. If I did not move my radial ulnar joints and I stayed prone, it would look like this. So I had to have supination somewhere during this part. Couple ways we can look at it. We'll use your technique and then we'll use the thumb rule, okay? If I let go of the bar, I can't pronate or supinate while I'm holding on to the bar. The bar won't let me. I can't even do bilateral. Some things you can do bilateral, like I could have bilateral flexion extension, but I can't bilateral ulnar radial deviate, and I can't bilaterally supinate. I have to let go, okay? So the point is that how do I look at my starting position? Well, I'm wrapped, my thumb is medial, I'm prone. Or you could say, what position am I in? Well, I can have supination all the way to anatomical, so I must be prone. Then when I get to this new position, if you're a thumb ruler, you follow the thumb and you say, whoa, my thumb is lateral. It's the lateral part of my lateral epicondyle. So how did my thumb go from being on the medial part to being on the lateral part? Again, you may not even see it. That's okay. You can prove it. The only way to go from being wrapped to being unwrapped is to have supination. Here's another way. This is your technique. Well, how can I move it? I can't supinate anymore. The only way I can move it is to have pronation. So if I started pronated and I went to a supinated position, I had to have supination on the way up. The radial ulnar joint is moving simultaneously. I set you up for this question when we did this. Remember that? That was my way of gradually leading you to the deeper and deeper waters. We established I had to have pronation here because that's the only way I could go from being supinated to being pronated. It's happening while my shoulders are trying to reposition. And if I want to keep my hands forward, I have to gradually think of it like this. This happened with that, just at the same time. So you don't see it as easy, but I'm gradually wrapping. So it's very similar when we do the upright row. My shoulder is abducting, but it can get my hands higher if it starts to externally rotate. Think about it. If I just have external rotation, look how my hand goes from being on the bottom to being on the top, like a catapult, right? So my shoulders are trying to bring my hands up. But if I stay prone, you're going to have this happen. My fingers are going to go from the bottom to the top. So if I stay prone, stay medial, how do I get my fingers to stay on the bottom? Supinate. Make sense? So the supination is happening with the shoulder motion to be able to keep your fingers on the bottom of the bar. Cool. What would your scapula be doing working with your shoulders? Yeah. And to get the bar a little higher, elevation. Remember on the test, elevation and depression is going to be its own question. And I'm going to work in upward and downward rotation with the shoulder motion, bringing your arms up. That's how I'm going to separate. Yep. Easiest way to look at it is like shifting up. And just as a review, is that happening at the shoulder? No. Is shoulder shrugs happening at the shoulder? No. Is somebody on the test going to tell me that shoulder shrugs is happening at the shoulder? Yes. That makes me sad. But it's going to happen. I don't know what to say. Some people are already certified personal trainers through Kellogg's cornflakes, and they say shrugs happen at the shoulder. Can't beat it. They're great. All right, we're good. Any questions? So coming down would just be the mirror opposite, right? If I'm supinated up here, as I come down, I'm going to have pronation. Guys, it can get easy the more you practice, but this is not easy. This is not easy, and that's why I teach it, so that you guys can be prepared for the not easy stuff. Pronation and supination, we've established, God, how many times where it looks like it's moving and it is, but there's some illusion stuff when, you know, one thing is fixed and the other's moving. I think the first one we had was the knee rotation, where I had to convince you. So I'm talking about the precedent. I had to convince you that lateral rotation of the knee is the exact same as the lateral rotation of the knee. Same concept, but just in a different place. Watch this. I think this is cool, if I can do it right. No pressure. I think I did this for the first time last semester and it went pretty well. I feel I'm about to pull out a rabbit out of this guy's ulna. Okay. Pronation, wrapped. Okay. Fingers need to stay under the bar. Did you see it unwrap? Okay. So what's happening is, instead of the radius wrapping and unwrapping about the ulna, which is attached to the humerus, is unwrapping about the radius. Wrapped, unwrapped. Huh? Tons of precedent. Ball moves about the socket, socket moves about the ball. All you've ever been taught, at no fault of your own, was how the radius wraps and unwraps an ulna, and that's not wrong. Well, what happens when it's fixed? Can the ulna wrap and unwrap around the radius? Absolutely. Just like I can move tibia about femur, and I can move femur about tibia. It's no different. All right, you cool cats and kittens, stand up for me. Stand up for me. Last application question. It's gonna be fun. What I want you to do is lean. If you have a shoulder or arm that's not hurt, just lean, put a little pressure on the table. It doesn't have to be all your body weight. And then what I want you to do is spin your arm in the transverse plane. Rotate your arm in the transverse plane. You may need to reposition your hand to make sure you get full range of motion there. Perfect. 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 Just like that. Okay? Just like that. Now, I'm setting up the question. You have your hand is fixed. Friction's not letting your hand move around. If your hand was off, you could do this. Also, your socket up here is fixed. In other words, the glenoid fossa of the scapula and the table are compressing your arm. So the humerus itself can't move by itself because it would rip out of the elbow. And the elbow can't move by itself because it would rip out of the shoulder. Does that make sense? This is fixed. This is fixed. But yet somehow something is moving. And that's my point, is that not just one joint could possibly move. There has to be two things that are canceling out to allow that motion to occur. So I'm telling you, your shoulder is rotating, and I want you to use your bicep as a landmark to see how. And I'm telling you, your radial ulnar joint is moving as well. Because if all that happened was your shoulder rotate, it would literally rip out of the elbow. Something has to move with it so that it doesn't rip out of socket. I want to see if you can match up when my shoulder has internal rotation using the clues or your techniques. When your shoulder has internal rotation, what is the radial ulnar joint doing? And when my shoulder has external rotation, what is the radial ulnar joint doing? Guys, there's only so many of these examples that I can give you where we're practicing our toolkit to try to figure it out. This is one of those, all right? And again, think of it yourself, but also feel free to, hey, what'd you get? What'd you get? Feel free to do it in small groups. I want to make sure we understand the question. Hand on the table, shoulder over the hand, and we're going to have transverse spin of something. I'm telling you, it's shoulder and radial ulnar. I'm giving you that information. I want to see if we could use our clues and landmarks to match up when the shoulder internally rotates. This is what the radial ulnar joint has to do. And when the shoulder externally rotates, this is what the radial ulnar joint has to do. Ready? Go. If the table isn't working for you, you can always lean it against the wall. It's the same concept. So if the table, just if that position isn't working with you, feel free to lean up against the wall. Maybe that'll help you see it a little better. But it's the same thing going on. Where are you at? Where did you go? How did you have to move to get there? Am I wrapped? Am I unwrapped? Is my thumb medial? Is my thumb lateral? Or you could remove it and say, where can I move it traditionally from here? Two different, all different forms of the same thing. Stop in the name of class before you break my wrist. That was really cheesy. Speaking of, is this wrist motion? We could see why people would say this is wrist motion, right? Is this wrist motion? Good. I'll give you a heads up. The shoulder should be very easy. The shoulder is actually going to follow. It looks like it's moving, and it is. The shoulder, if you follow your bicep or the spin medially, spin laterally, spin internally, spin externally, the shoulder will be what it appears to do. It's that radial ulna. What's happening is we have the distal end fixed. So the radius isn't wrapping and unwrapping. It's literally the ulna that's wrapping and unwrapping, because the ulna is connected to the humerus. And so if the humerus is spinning normally, the ulna has to go with it or it's going to rip out of socket. So that's why it just looks different. And that's why I'm teaching you techniques for landmarks. Where are you at? Where did you go? Because not all movement is going to be traditional. It looks like it's moving, and it is. So that's what's happening. This is fixed. This is moving. And because the hand is fixed, that means the radius is fixed. So it's the ulna that's wrapping and unwrapping around the radius. But we still call it the same thing. We still called this is left transverse cervical and this is left transverse cervical. Same concept. God, time goes fast. No, I just want, so you would actually not be able to ulnar radial deviate here because your wrist is extended. So we're looking at pronation or supination of the radial ulnar. What I think we can do, if it's all right with you, I didn't mean this to turn into a Dr. Seuss book. Maybe Wednesday we can do some practical lower extremity practice examples review. Friday we can do upper extremity practice review, and then Monday is hey, you come with, now you could still come with questions, examples. You know what works really well is, we were studying or we found this exercise, I'll tend to use those kind of things on test if I see new things. That'll be the game plan for the rest of the week. All right, here we go. Let's get the shoulder out of the way first. Internal or medial, external or lateral. Because for my shoulder, that's no different than this and this. Cool? Let me go more straight up. Internal medial, external lateral. Cool? Okay. Now I need to match up. Again, guys, if all I did was rotate my humerus, it would literally dislocate from the ulna because my hand's fixed. So what I need to do is say, okay, when I internally rotate, does my radial ulnar joint wrap or unwrap? And it really doesn't matter. It's the same thing. So let me put it here. Maybe you guys have a better view. Internally rotated, externally rotated. When I'm here or when I'm here, I can always come up off the table, if that helps, to kind of give me a starting point. That looks pretty wrapped. landmarks. Okay, landmarks. Internal rotation is going to go with pronation. External rotation is going to go with supination. Internal rotation is going to go with pronation. External rotation. Hey, Brian. Sorry. Dang it, Cam. See? It's confusing. External rotation is going to go with pronation. Internal rotation, sorry, that's why we got to do this. I was doing it on purpose to see if y'all paid attention. I shouldn't have worn all this heavy stuff. Okay, so in essence, what we're doing is we know, here's my bicep, this is my medial epicondyle, this is my lateral epicondyle, right? So my thumb right here is on the medial side. So when I have internal rotation, I'm literally just bringing the lateral side to line up with the thumb. Does that make sense? And then when I have external rotation, I'm bringing the medial side to line up with the thumb. So internal rotation with supination and external rotation with pronation. So again, I'm going to, instead of trying to do the bicep, I'm just going to keep my reference as the medial epicondyle. So when I'm here, thumb is medial. And when I'm here, thumb is lateral. Does that make sense? Thumb is on the lateral side. So I'm literally bringing, instead of bringing the feet over, I'm literally just moving the bed in that analogy to the feet. Medial side, come visit the thumb, pronation. Lateral side, go visit the thumb, supination. That's why we don't. That's why we don't assume. So what I did is, let's summarize today. One is the reason we have radial and ulnar deviation of the wrist is because our metacarpal phalangeals have this weird, crazy abduction thing they got going on. That would be confusing. Do not confuse radial and ulnar deviation with radial ulnar joint pronation and supination. Make sense? So radial deviation is just a motion or position of the wrist. Radial ulnar is a joint of wrap and unwrap. And my intent to show you these two different tricky ones was to show you how multiple motions happening up here where external rotation of the shoulder can work with supination. And then internal rotation of the shoulder could also work with supination. Like you can't necessarily like, oh, when this happens, that it depends on what you need it for. Again, I may cancel out something in order to keep my eyes looking one way, but I also may go with it if I'm trying to look behind me. It depends on what you need it for. That makes sense? So you can't always say, well, when my trunk twists to the right, my neck has to twist to the left. Well, what if I'm trying to look behind me? My trunk twists to the right, well, my neck may want to twist to the right. We don't want to have these rules that we always go by. Make sense? Cool. All right, you guys, we'll see you Wednesday. I hope that was fun.